Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, and with the launch of the 2060 and 2070 Super Series recently, you probably found that we've been kind of muddling our way through some of the AIB cards. We had Gigabyte the other day, we also had Palette, so definitely check them out. But today sees the turn of Zotac with their RTX 2070 Super Amp Extreme. Let's take a look. Before I actually sort of delve into the Amp Extreme and kind of what Zotac have done to this card, I want to talk a little bit about pricing because it does vary region to region to start with, and there has been a little bit of, I guess, premature inflation at the moment from the side of retailers, which I think is primarily down to the fact that there are, I guess, stock shortages. So when the RTX 2070 Super actually launched from Nvidia with the Founders Edition, it had an MSRP of £499 or $499. So it was a kind of, a good price point to sort of set to. So then we expected obviously AIB cards to come out with their custom cooler designs and pre-overclocks, maybe a little bit above that. Now, when I was actually searching around for this specific card, I couldn't actually find it for sale in America at all, which is a bit weird because normally you'd find Zotac pretty prevalent at the likes of Newegg and Amazon. Now, in the UK, there was a few different prices. So the cheapest was actually at Scan at $527.99. Overclockers, they actually had it, slightly inflated at $539.99. It seemed to be a bit of a common trend with overclockers and all of the RTX Super cards. eBuyer were priced about the same as Scan at £529.98. And we are told that this card is actually going to be retailing for €569 in sort of the bulk of Europe, including VAT. Now, just to kind of put that into perspective, we do have the 5700 XT, which launched recently for £379.99, which I'm going to be honest, even without looking at the benchmarks of this, if you are on a budget and you want kind of, best value versus performance, it's probably the card to go for. But there's things that it doesn't offer, such as ray tracing, and that's what an RTX card is all about. While we're not looking at ray tracing today, we are looking at kind of, your generic, benchmarks. It's definitely something to consider if you want to, have things like ray tracing and DLSS in the likes of Battlefield 5, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Metro Exodus, and so forth. So let's jump in now and take a look at the card itself, kind of see what Zotac have done compared to, the competition and what Nvidia have got with their Founders Edition. So with the 2070 Super Founders Edition, we're looking at clock speeds of 1605 on the GPU clock, 1770 on the boost clock, and 1750 on the memory. Now, with this card, it has actually come with a slight kind of pre-factory overclock, let's call it that. The memory speed is exactly the same at 1750, but it's the boost clock that's actually changed. So the GPU core clock is still 1605, but the boost clock has actually changed from 1770 up to 1830. So we are expecting this to obviously be a little bit better than your bog standard RTX 2070 Supers out there. Now, Zotac have always been one for kind of working on, the naming behind kind of, Arctic Storm and ice and cool and, trying to use the magic buzzwords like that. So what we do actually have here is the Ice Storm 2.0 cooler. Now, what this actually comprises of is a triple fan design featuring 3 90mm fans. Now, there is actually fan control on this, and it does give you the ability to push airflow to kind of whatever end of the card that you want it to. So from what I can tell, these two fans are actually run off one kind of controller, while the third fan is run off of a second controller. So you can kind of control, where the heat is and where the airflow is being pushed to on the card itself. It does have a large twin aluminium heatsink, which does have an improved heat pipe layout, at least in comparison to the kind of previous generation of cooler that Zotac were putting on their cards. Underneath the cooler room, we will kind of put up a bit of a blown out diagram, but there is actually a base plate which covers over the memory and the VRMs just to kind of give it some extra cooling and also that all important rigidity for when it's sitting inside your chassis, avoiding things like GPU sag and so forth. The only other kind of aspect to the cooling comes down to the backplate, which does cover over, pretty much all of the PCB, and it actually bends round to the end of the card. It does have some subtle branding on there with Zotac Gaming and Live to Game, and while yes, it may do something for the cooling aspect, it is really more of an aesthetic thing, because when it's inside your chassis, this is pretty much what you're going to see. Would have been nice to maybe cover this up with, something, anything, but either way, it still looks nice. Obviously, no graphics card is complete in 2019 without a little bit of RGB. So on the top, we do notice that there is the Zotac Gaming logo on there. So that's pretty much the only RGB on this card. And of course, that can be controlled through Zotac's own software. Now, another key thing that we've noticed on the RTX 2070 supercards that we haven't seen before on sort of, your non-supercards is the ability to have these in SLI through NVLink. So there is a single, NVLink finger, so that if you did want to, you could put this into SLI to get even more gaming performance. But it's one of them things where I guess you have to look at the difference between buying two of these cards comparing to, I guess, one higher end card, such as a 2080 or 2080 Super, which is coming out soon, or a 2080 Ti. Sometimes if you can get a good deal, yes, it is actually better off buying two of the lower end cards, like two 2070 Supers, instead of buying that one high end card. But you are probably gonna have more issues with the likes of heat dissipation because of how close the cards are actually gonna be to each other. Now, expansion slot wise, you can see that it does only take up 2 slots in the back of your case, but the cooler actually protrudes a little bit beyond this. Now, there is kind of a hexagonal kind of design on here, which is obviously going to help with dissipation of airflow and exhaust out of the back of your chassis. In terms of the connectors on here, we do have 3 DisplayPort connectors, which are DisplayPort 1.4 and 1 HDMI 2.0 port. For some reason, a little bit different to most RTX 2070 Supers out there, there is no USB Type-C on here, which is obviously assisting the likes of Virtual Link. So if you are using Oculus or HTC, normally you'd plug into there, but for some reason, it just hasn't got the connector. Strange. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in this card is pre-overclocked, but that doesn't mean that you can't sort of, even push it out a little bit further. So Zotac actually have their own software called Firestorm. Now, within this, there is the likes of the OC scanner. So you can do everything manually, or you can go through OC scanner, which will basically do a few tests. Your screen will go black a little bit. It will come back up and tell you exactly what your kind of, suggested overclock is. Well, we went to do that and, it bumped it up by 15 megahertz. Nothing exactly groundbreaking. So we decided to go back to the old school and do it our way through manually overclocking. So let's talk a little bit about how far we were able to push this and then take a look at them all important glorious benchmarks. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in this video, this card does come out the factory with a slight overclock on there. Obviously, the core clock or GPU clock is set to 1605, but the boost clock is actually set to 1830. So we were actually able to take the core clock ever so slightly further from the 1605 up to 1680, giving us a GPU clock speed increase of 4.67%. The boost speed went from 1830 to 1905, giving us a 4% increase. So not exactly crazy numbers, but pretty much what we've been getting on all of the other cards from other partners. Now, memory is where it really kind of came to play. As we know with the way that these are geared, and even with Pascal, and then moving on to obviously the Turing architecture, memory has always been something that we've been able to push quite dramatically. So we went from 1750 on the memory all the way up to 2040, which is a whopping 16.57%. And as you can see from the screen that we're showing you now, you can see kind of the difference in, I guess, the increased frame rates within games, the acoustics, temperature, and power consumption, as well as kind of how far that overclock pushes you in terms of 3D Mark Firestrike. So yeah, it's always obviously worth it if you can keep the temperatures down to overclock it. So with overclocking out the way, the main thing that we are all here for is to check out them glorious benchmarks. So let's take a look and see how it does. So there you have it, there's the results, and what can we really say about it? I guess the card performed exactly how we expected it to. Kind of traded blows a little bit with the palette card, which admittedly is around the same kind of clock speeds, admittedly is about the same kind of price. But if you're in America, you're not going to be able to buy the palette card, so maybe the Zotac is the one for you. I do like the fact that it has kind of, I guess, the next iteration of their cooler on it. And when it comes to just general core pure performance, is it good value for money? Well, in the grand scheme of things, yes it is, because you have to remember what you're getting. Yes, I could say that right now the best value money kind of graphics card out on the market is going to be the 5700 XT from AMD, but what does it really offer you over this? Not a great deal. Yes, it's 7nm, but what does that really mean for the user? Not a great deal. So let's push that to one side. I'm not dismissing it, but hear me out. If you want the latest technologies, then you're going to be looking at an RTX card, purely because they offer things that I guess AMD just simply don't at the moment, including ray tracing, DLSS, and so forth. So if you want, I guess, the most immersive feeling within your game, if you want the best quality looking kind of graphics, performance aside, 2D, 3D, if you just want it to really sort of pop, then yes, you're going to have to go with an RTX card. So Zotac aside, Nvidia definitely have it right with the 2070 Super, because it does offer amazing value for money when you think about the features that you're getting. What Zotac have been able to do is kind of harness that power and that technology and just take it one step further by adding in a better cooling solution, higher clock speeds, and pretty damn good value for money compared to other 2070 Supers. And Zotac have always been one of them brands that kind of, I don't know, offers you a good quality solid product for a good reasonable price with good customer services. So yeah, I can't really fault it. And of course it has that all important tiny piece of RGB for those who want it, because RGB makes everything faster, better, stronger, hard. No wait, that's a Daft Punk song. Either way, you get it guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know exactly what to do, and let us know in the comments section below. Do you want to see some kind of, more videos like this where we're just looking at various different AIB cards, or do you want to see something more geared towards kind of RTX, ray tracing, and some of the features that Nvidia have actually invested into this? Let me know, I'm really interested to see sort of what the market is actually after. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do, and I will see you in the next one. See you later guys, bye bye. Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, Zotac Gaming, Zotac, Amp Extreme 2070 Super. Sorry, the 2070 Super launched with an MSRP. Never do that again. eBuyer were priced at about the same as Scan at 300. I mean, a blower style card is going to be. I'm rambling. My nose!